Today, I will set out the government's approach to manage the impact of high global gas prices affecting the UK and countries across Europe. To begin, I want to make 2 points extremely clear. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, I must stress that protecting consumers is our our primary focus, and will shape our entire approach to this important issue. Secondly, I also want to reassure the House that while the UK, like other countries in Europe, has been affected by global prices, Britain benefits from having a diverse range of gas supply sources. We have sufficient capacity, and more than sufficient capacity, to meet demand, and we do not expect supply emergencies to occur this winter. There is absolutely no question, Mr. Speaker, of the lights going out or people being unable to heat their homes. There'll be no 3-day working weeks or a throwback to the 1970s. Such thinking, Mr. Speaker, is alarmist, unhelpful, and completely misguided. To begin, I'd like to set out, Mr. Speaker, some of the context for the global situation we are now witnessing. As the world comes out of COVID-19 and economies reopen, we are seeing a dramatic uptick in global gas demand, much faster than many people had anticipated. High demand, Mr. Speaker, in Asia for liquefied natural gas transported globally by freight means that far less LNG has reached Europe. Weather events in the US have also affected LNG exports to Europe. So therefore, increased demand coupled with reduced variety of supply globally has put upward pressure on the price of gas, which is traded globally. High wholesale gas prices have subsequently driven an increase in wholesale power prices, with a number of short-term markets trading at or near record levels. While we are not complacent, we do not expect supply emergencies this winter. This is a very important point. This is not a question of security of supply. The GB, the Great British UK gas system, has delivered securely to date and is expected to continue to function effectively with a diverse range of supply sources and sufficient delivery capacity to more than meet the demand. The National Grid Electricity System Operator has the tools within itself to operate the electricity system reliably, to balance that system, and we remain confident that electricity security can be maintained under a very wide range of scenarios. We aren't reliant on any one particular source for our gas, like many of our friends in Europe. Domestic production, as members and right honourable members should know, is our largest single gas supply source and accounted for about 50% of total supply last year. However, the UK also benefits from an excellent relationship with Norway, one of our most important and reliable energy partners, and that delivers nearly 30% of our total gas supply. Just in the last half hour, Mr. Speaker, I was privileged enough to speak to the Norwegian Energy Minister and to welcome the announcement from Equinor today that gas production will significantly increase from the 1st of October this year to support the UK and European demand. Our remaining supply, Mr. Speaker, is sourced from global markets via 2 interconnectors to the continent, and also through the our LNG infrastructure, which is, as many of you know, as many members know, is the largest in Europe. Obviously, the global gas situation has had an impact on some of our energy suppliers. We've already seen 4 suppliers exit the market in recent weeks, and we may well expect to see further companies exiting the market over the coming weeks. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, at this point, that having been Energy Minister for nearly 2 years before I became Secretary of State, we saw in those 2 years, around this time, companies exiting the market. It may well be more this year, but this is something which, at this time of year, ahead of the renewable obligation certificate payment, this is something which is often seen in the market. I want to make it very clear today, however, that this is not unusual. It is not unusual for smaller energy suppliers to exit the market, particularly, I may add, when wholesale global prices are rising. The sector has seen, as I've said, regular entry and exit over the last 5 to 10 years, and that is indeed a feature of a highly competitive market. The current global situation, as I've said, Mr. Speaker, may see more suppliers than usual exiting the market, but this is not something which should be any cause for alarm or panic. We have clear processes in place to make sure that all customers are supplied with energy. When an energy supplier typically fails, Mr. Speaker, Ofgem appoints another supplier to take on serving the customers, and there is no interruption to supply. I reiterate, our first and primary consideration is for the customer. I'd like to stress 3 further principles which are guiding my and the government's approach in this matter. Firstly, the government will not be bailing out failed companies. There will be no rewards for failure or mismanagement. The taxpayer should not be expected to prop up companies which have poor business models and are not resilient to fluctuations in price. Secondly, customers, especially, most particularly, vulnerable customers, must be protected from price spikes. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that the energy market does not pay the price for the poor practices of a minority of companies, and that the market still maintains the competition, which is a feature of today's current system. We must not simply return to, I quote, the cosy oligopoly of years past, where a few large suppliers simply dictated to customers conditions and pricing. I'd like to reassure all members and honourable members' constituents that the energy price cap, which saves 15 million households up to £100 a year, is staying. It's not going anywhere. As I said earlier, our priority in this situation has to be the consumer, the great British public. And the cap has done that effectively. It protects and has protected millions of customers from sudden increases in global prices this winter. We are committed to that price cap, and it will remain in place. Meanwhile, sir, our warm home discount, winter fuel payments, and cold weather payments will continue to support millions of vulnerable and low-income households with their energy bills. It is absolutely vital that the energy supply sector remains a liberalised, competitive market in order to deliver value and good service to consumers. As a result of high global gas prices, members and right honourable members will have read, perhaps, that 2 fertiliser plants shut down in Teesside and Cheshire last week. They suspended the production of CO2 and ammonia, a decision which has surely has affected in the short term our domestic supply of carbon dioxide, which, as everybody knows, is used in the food and drink, and as well as the nuclear and health sectors. Yesterday, I met Tony Will, the Global Chief Executive of CF Industries. We discussed the pressures the business is facing, and we have explored, quite thoroughly, possible ways to secure vital supplies. Work is ongoing across departments in Whitehall, across the government, to ensure that those sectors which are impacted, which are affected by this announcement, have appropriate contingency plans in place to ensure that there is indeed minimal disruption. To maintain our domestic supplies of CO2, we are in constant contact with relevant companies who produce and supply CO2, and we are monitoring the situation minute by minute. Over the past few days, as has been widely reported, I have held several discussions with chief executives of the UK's largest energy suppliers and operators, and also with Ofgem to discuss this vital issue. Just this morning, I chaired a roundtable with UK energy companies and the representatives of consumer groups, in which I reiterated, as I have done on the floor of this House, the need for all of us in government and across the industry to prioritise customers, in short, to protect the consumer.